Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Reading Little Blue Books Out Loud while stoned. In this video, we're going to do the final part, I believe it's part 4, possibly part 5, I forgot to check, of Little Blue Book number 191, titled Evolution Versus Dogma, written by Maynard Shipley. And this will be the final chapter, chapter 5. But I think this is video 4. So, chapter 5. A question of origin of the eye. A New York fundamentalist minister wrote a little book in which he gleefully referred to the absurd doctrine of biologists, or evolutionists, that eyes came into existence in response to the effect of light waves upon the skin, i.e., upon certain photoplasmic cells. He also got a great kick out of the statement of biologists that if there were no land, there would be no legs, and if there were no water, there would be no fins, structures and functions being responses to environment. This variety of thinking is strongly reminiscent of Paley's once famous natural theology, in which this eminent 18th century divine remarks that it is indeed a wise dispensation of an all-seeing God that he put holes in the cat's fur just where the eyes are. Mr. Byron enjoys the New York divine's sarcasm and comments on two of those absurdities as follows in pages 28 and 29. The evolutionist guesses himself away from God, but he only makes matters worse. How long did the light waves have to play? Got to turn the page to find out. Nope, that's not the right page. Oh, these pages stuck together earlier too. Okay. How long did the light waves have to play on the skin before the eyes came out? The evolutionist is very deliberate. He is long on time, whereas the fundamentalist can do the job in his imagination between the morning and the evening of the fifth day. He would certainly give the eye of the vertebrates thousands of years, if not millions, in which to develop, whereas it is well known to all good fundamentalists that the whole of creation occurred within 144 hours. But how could he be sure that the light waves played all the time in one place, or played in the same place generation after generation until the development was complete? Having unfortunately no ancient Babylonian or Syrian poet or theologist to impart to him the details, humorous as Mr. Byron's science is, his ridiculous injections of gratuitous assumptions should not be allowed to go unchallenged, for there are millions of voters who may be inclined to take them on their face value and vote those wholly imaginary absurdities out of our educational institutions. No true believer doubts that the learned politician and attorney for Moses knows more about comparative physiology and morphology than the depraved evolutionist, who have devoted a lifetime of arduous investigation and thought to these subjects. Our savant asks, but how could he, the evolutionist, be sure that the light waves played all the time in one place, or played in the same place generation after generation until the development was complete? Here we have a full exposure of the abysmal ignorance of this layman who undertakes to speak for his theological clients on a question of science. For either the colonel does not know that the entire earth is bathed in sunlight day by day, clouds not temporarily or locally intervening, and that it therefore plays all over animals possessing effective organs of vision, or else he guesses that evolutionists teach that visual organs developed in organisms only when the light waves played in the time in one place, to the exclusion of other places. Hydration. This hydration brought to you by my friend Maddie. It goes without saying that the evolutionists need not be sure that the light waves played all the time in one place or played in the same place generation after generation. This is a difficulty invented by a lawyer to discredit the investigations and conclusions of a scientist. But it is also partly a difficulty arising from Mr. Byron's total ignorance of the role of radiant energy in biology, of his ignorance of the fact that light rays of different wavelengths have different effects on different kinds of protoplasm, as also on different kinds of albumins and proteins, and therefore we witness different effects on different organisms and on different parts of the same organism by alternately exposing blind newts to artificial red light and daylight. Kammerer, 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 developed their eyes, restoring their visual faculty. See his The Inheritance of Acquired Characteristics, page 176 and 179, New York, 1924. These facts, experimentally established, are a sufficient answer to Mr. Byron's foolish question. But he also asks, why did the light waves not keep on playing until there were eyes all over the body? Here, the champion of the Rock of Ages shows that he has so little understanding of the few bound volumes consulted by him in a long lifetime of fatuous oratory that he does not know that the earliest function of the simplest living cell is assimilation and digestion of nutrient. Pardon me. Respiration of oxygen and elimination of waste products. Eyes cannot live by vision alone. They are not organs of nutrition and excretion. They must be nourished by some portion of the cell or cells in which they occur. With eyes all over the body, by which Byron means the vertebrate eye, no nutrient could be obtained. An animal, all eyes, would be an animal minus a nutritive equipment. It would also be an animal with eyes all over the body. Therefore, we know that digestive functions exist prior to the existence of eyes, as illustrated today in the amoeba and other unicellular animals. And those protozoa, one-celled animals, which are more complex in structure, a portion of the living cell has become specialized for ingestion and assimilation of food. Another portion, verily through the effects of light rays of definite wavelengths, playing upon a special complex of molecules, particularly sensitive to light rays of a special wavelength or rate of vibration, developed spots, which eventually became what we now recognize as primitive visual organs. A large number of the phytoflagellida, yeah, that's what we're going with, classed as algae by the botanist, possesses beautiful ruby-colored ocular spots. In Cyneria uvelia of the Chrysomonidalia family, a colony-forming flagellate, there exist in each individual, in the anterior part of the body, numerous spots, varying from 2 to 10. One or more eye spots are found also in Uroglena volvox, also a colonial form colored by yellow chlorophyll, as also in the spherical colony Pandorina morum and other algae. In the last named species, Balbani, Balbani, 1887, reported the presence of crystalline lenses in the order Ivdanoflagellates. The eye spot becomes more complex, closely akin to the metazoan, many-celled eye. Nerve fibers accepted or expected, possessing a transparent, highly reflective lens, the inner surface of which is immersed in a cap-like mass of red or black pigment, which represents possibly the choroidal membrane. This rudimentary choroid, choroid, yeah, choroid, envelops the posterior extremity of the lenses. The choroid in vertebrates lines the sclerotic membrane, or tough outer coat of the eye to which the ocular muscles are attached. The hemispherical choroid, choroid mass of the protozoa, according to Pouchet, is the result of the combination of a pigmentary granules, which the lens is formed by the union of from 6 to 8 refrigerants, corpuscles. Copernica showed that the red pigment of euglena, euglena exhibits the same reactions as the coloring matter that fills the rods of the retina in the vertebrates. In the multicellular organisms, similar light rays would play upon the animal as a whole with the same result, namely, certain cells being more susceptible to light rays of a given frequency would develop visual organs. The optical cells of all invertebrates have developed from pigmented cells in the outer skin sensitive to light. In some of the lowly forms, light refracting organs have developed. The development of pigment in the cells surrounding the nerve end keeps away all side light. As soon as a lens is formed in a pigmented cavity, the light rays pass directly through the lens to the nerve end, and we have a specialized visual organ able to distinguish not only light from darkness. The outer skin of wholly eyeless animals can do this much, but also the contour and position of objects. By the time we reach the vertebrates, even the lowliest of them, the eye no longer originates from the cells of the ectoderm or outer skin. All the while, a brain has been developing behind the eyes of primitive creatures. Hydrate, kids. By the time the amphibious or ascidian stage of evolution has been attained, certain cells of the brain had become the source of the essential visual apparatus. Eyes developing in the vertebrates from a lateral extension of the forebrain. The complicated structure known as the retina of the eye is really a part of the central nervous system and has fundamentally the same structure. The lens and cornea, separated by a chamber called the aqueous humor, are part of the skin of the side of the head. This lens is an originally hollow plug of ectoderm cells, which breaks loose from the skin and lies in the mouth of the secondary optic vehicle. The skin outside the lens forms the cornea, which is transparent. I'm going to have to pause this. Okay, I had to pause, I had to cough. Without going into a full description of the human eye, I may point out that while light must reach the visual cells through their basal and not through their visual ends, there are no grounds for supposing that this is a primitive arrangement. According to Shipley and McBride, we must believe that when the eye was being evolved, the rods of the visual cells were directed towards the light, and that the epithelium of which they form a part was exposed and not rolled up into a neural tube. In a word, that the front portion of the nervous system of the vertebrate, at any rate, was once a plate of sensitive skin. It is most suggestive to note that in the larvae of Hemicordia, we find such a plate with two eye spots at the apex of the preoral lobe. Byron has in his scientific arsenal another stunner. If the light waves created the eyes, why did they not create them strong enough to bear the light? Why did the light waves make eyes and then make eyelids to keep the light out of the eyes? That's on page 28 and 29 of Byron's book. Well, if Jehovah Elohim created the eyes, why did he not create them strong enough to bear the light? And we may go a bit farther than this. If and why business. If Jehovah Elohim made the eyes when he made man, not only made the eyes, but carved out the caverns in the skull in which they hang, why didn't he make eyes that man can see with? Why did he make it necessary for the very persons who need correct visual most, students, to wear on their noses a man-made improvement on the woefully defective eye made, according to the fundamentalist, by Jehovah Elohim? Perhaps Mr. Byron can answer as well as ask questions. I await his answer with interest. Origin of limbs. Now we come to the Chautauqua idea of how modern teachers of the evolution theory account for the origin and development of the limbs. How? Well, the guess is that a little animal, Byron does not know which class of animals the theoretical little animal belongs to, or possibly he knows but doesn't consider it good fundamentalism. Dagnabbit. Let's try that again. Or consider it good fundamentalism. To let his reader in on the secret, for fear it might spoil his argument. Without legs, was wiggling around on its belly one day when it discovered a wart. It just happened so, and it was in the right place to be used to aid in locomotion. So it came to depend on the wart. And use finally developed it into a leg. And then another wart and another leg, one day after the other, as it were, at the proper time, by accidentally, in the proper place. Is it not astonishing that any person intelligent enough to teach school would talk such tommy rot to students and look serious while doing so? Page 27 of Mr. Byron's book. Not so astonishing. If the teacher happens to be a fundamentalist, telling his students that the earth was luxuriating in flowers and fruits on the third day of creation, and then on the fourth day the sun was created. Or that a little animal without legs was wriggling along on its belly one day when it discovered not a wart, but a cunning knowledge of the Hebrew language, by whose employment it informed Eve that Jehovah Elohim had misinformed her about the tree of knowledge, that she would not surely die if she partook of it. Is it not indeed astonishing that anyone would talk such tommy rot to students and look serious while doing so? But anyone who would let Mr. Byron get away with his little animal crawling over the earth and his little wart developing first on one side, then later on the other, and so forth, could do anything and look serious while doing so. And so, with the ears, they must have gone in to hear instead of out. And wasn't it lucky that they happened to go in on opposite sides of the head instead of catty-cornered or at random? Mr. Byron presents us, as he says, of Darwin and others, with such an abundance of ludicrous material that it is hard to resist the temptation to continue illustrations indefinitely, in order that you may be prepared to ridicule those pseudoscientists who come to you with guesses instead of facts. Not to continue the redoubtable Colonel's blather farther, let us turn now to the first two or three works on zoology that happen to be at hand, published before the menace of Darwinism appeared to amuse the cultivated crowd, and see if we can find any warrant in modern evolutionary science for Mr. Byron's warts. The first volume I happened to pick up was published in 1917, The Origin and Evolution of Life, by Dr. H. F. Osborn, research professor of zoology in Columbia University. I shall now quote a few sentences from his work on the question of the origin of legs, though unfortunately Professor Osborn says nothing whatever about warts. It was long believed that the air and water breathing amphibia, which do not include Dr. Byron's anonymous little animal without legs, wriggling along in its belly, developing a wart leg. The first legged animals evolved from the pony. No, dipnoi. That's what we're calling it, dipnoi. The air breathing fishes of the inland fresh waters. And this hypothesis was stoutly maintained by Carl Gegenbauer, who also upheld that he termed the Archipegian theory of the origin of the vertebrate limb, namely, that the prototype of the modern limbed forms of terrestrial vertebrates is to be found in the fin, not Mr. Byron's wart, of the modern Australian lungfish. The hypothesis of Gegenbauer, which has been warmly supported by a talented group of his students, is memorable as the last of the great hypotheses regarding vertebrate descent, to be found exclusively upon comparative anatomy and embryology, as opposed to the triple evidence afforded by those sciences when reinforced by paleontology. It is through the discovery of primitive types of the fringe-finned gangoids, to which Huxley gave the appropriate name crossopetragia, in reference to the fringe of dermal rays around a central lobe fin of cartilaginous rods, that the true ancestry of the amphibia and the amphibian limb has been traced. This is now regarded as due to a partial change of adaptation incident to the passage of the animal from the littoral life zone to the shore zone, whereby the propelling fin was gradually transformed into the propelling limb. This transformation implies a long terrestrial-aquatic phase, in which the fin was partly used for propulsion on muddy surfaces. That was on page 174. Comparing the classifying observations of Professor Osborn with the ignorant or dishonest discussion of the origin of legs of a professional fundamentalist, one sees at once the startling difference between a rational scientific attempt at elucidation of a difficult problem of evolution and the tricky obscurantism of an ill-informed preacher of outworn dogmas. Turning now to one more modern work, which Mr. Byron could have consulted had he wished to be honest in his criticism of evolutionary doctrine, I need only quote a few words from Professor H. H. Newman's college textbook on vertebrate zoology, published early in 1920, new edition 1924, pages 174 and 175. It is now generally admitted that the amphibia arose as a lateral branch from a very early group of lobe-finned ganoids. The time of emergence of the first amphibia appears to have been about Middle Devonian. Strata formed some 15 to 20 million years ago, the period when the fishes gained their earliest pronounced ascendancy and when all of the available habitat complexes were occupied. The earliest traces of amphibian life is a single footprint of a three-toed species found in the upper Devonian shells of Pennsylvania. This foot, though primitive, was a true foot, not a fin. It is therefore probable that there were many transitional stages from the fin to the foot, which are beyond our ken. I don't know what that means, ken, K-E-N. It's an older phrase, I guess. And that the transition occupied at least thousands of years. The skeletal structure of the lobe-fin ganoid, paired fins, especially that of the pectorals, is quite hand-like, not wart-like, in arrangement, so that a dropping off of the fringe-like fin portion would leave a structure quite like a hand with three or more fingers. The present-day lobe fins use the pectoral fin like a land limb in that they support the weight upon it while resting on the bottom. So a functional change may readily have preceded the radical structural change. It is probable that although many early lung-breathing fishes made the one type fully succeeded, oh wait, no, fishes made the beginnings of adaptation to true land life. Only one type fully succeeded and became the first true amphibia, the ancestors of all those today living. If the reader will thoughtfully compare the foregoing brief extractions from the explanation attributed to contemporary evolutionists by Mr. Byron with his wart, and then another wart, which use finally developed into a leg, he will see how the counsel for the defense has invented or garbled or misrepresented a theory of the origin and evolution of the limbs, which is quite out of harmony with any view held by evolutionists today. And now we go to the origin of ears. As to the ears, which Byron tells us must have gone in to hear instead of out, the learned rock Rockovgist, the learned Rockovgist seems to be utterly ignorant of the fact that the primitive function of the structure which eventually developed into the mammalian ear was not that of hearing at all. The primary function of the whole organ, like that of the octocyst of Medusa, Crustacea, and Mollusca, is to enable the animal to perceive its position, says Shipley and McBride in their standard textbook on zoology, page 420. In the higher forms of Cranitia, the lower part of the organ gives off a spiral tube, the cochlea, which contains the true auditory sense cells, as distinguished from the sense hairs and sense cells of the ampulla, i.e., swellings of the semicircular canals. Mr. Byron guesses, or believes, that the ears of man were created forthwith by magic. The evolutionist knows that ears, like eyes and legs, wings and hands, noses and teeth, are the result of a slow development from simple beginnings to the complex forms and structures we see today. The evolutionist is at work studying and investigating and reasoning instead of guessing that the childlike myths of the ancients concerning gods and miracles are truths. He knows that they are fiction, surpassing anything to be found in the Arabian Nights. The fundamentalists delight in miracles. If the great naturalist and biologist of the world had only brought forward the theory of evolution as a miracle, every true believer in the country would be out boosting for it. But a question was raised some years ago by a fairly orthodox Christian, which I pass on to the orthodox of today to answer. In his lectures on the evidences of Christianity, the Reverend Albert Barnes, one of the oldest American authorities on the New Testament, wrote as follows. An important question is whether there is any stronger evidence in favor of miracles than there is in favor of witchcraft or sorcery, or the reappearance of the dead, or apparitions. Is not the evidence in favor of these as strong as any that can be adduced in favor of miracles? Have not these things been matters of universal belief? In what respect is the evidence in favor of the miracles of the Bible stronger than that which can be adduced in favor of witchcraft and sorcery? Has not the evidence in favor of the latter been derived from as competent and reliable witnesses? Has it all not been brought to us by those who saw the facts alleged? I confess that of all the questions ever asked on the subject of miracles, this is the most perplexing and the most difficult to answer. It was common adage among the Greeks, miracles for fools. And the same proverb obtained among the shrewder Romans in the saying, the common people like to be deceived. Deceived, let them be. And that is the end of Little Blue Book number 191, titled Evolution Versus Dogma, written by Maynard Shipley. And does it have a copyright date? I don't remember. Yes, written in 1925. Now, coming up next is Little Blue Book number 191, Evolution and Religion, written by Ramsden Balmforth. And yes, there are two Little Blue Books numbered 191. And sometimes they did that. E. Hatem and Julius, if a book was not selling right or selling enough with that title, then he would change the title. Or he would have somebody rewrite it, as he did here. This is a completely different book by a completely different author under the same number listing in the Little Blue Book catalog. So that'll be the next Little Blue Book. Thanks for listening, and join me in the next Little Blue Book.